Hello everybody. This is part 3 of my analysis of this discussion between Subboor and this caller. At the end of part 2, we concluded that Subboor didn't have any coherent argument against the endogenous retroviruses being evidence of homology. He moves more into the statistical arguments now, so let's have a listen.
What I do want us to agree upon is that the argument that you're using from ERV is essentially a homologous argument, and a homologous argument will not make sense unless we look into the foundations of homology, which is origination probabilities and transition probabilities.
Sure, and if you think there's another way you can explain it, you are welcome to give explanation.
This is a theme that's recurring a lot in this discussion. The caller says something sensible, Subboor rubbishes what the caller is saying. The caller then asks Subboor to give his explanation, which Subboor doesn't because he doesn't have one.
I don't think you understood what I was saying.
Okay, I'm trying to understand you, but I think you're just delving into semantics. You're asking me to define things, and then I define a word a certain way. It doesn't matter the specific term you use. The point is that they exist, and I'm trying to ask you about where we should see for their origins.
So the caller here is clearly getting frustrated with Subboor's use of semantics and other tactics to cloud the discussion, and he has now gone back to asking Subboor to try and give an explanation for the endogenous retroviruses that does not imply homology.
Okay, so let me make a claim, and let's see if you can challenge this claim.
Go ahead.
I think theologically, there is nothing wrong with me accepting ERVs, and that within my theology, I could explain it as God inserting those things. Everything is predestined. Like, it doesn't challenge creationism. Tell me why it's contradictory to creationism.
He has been telling you since the beginning of this call that the most likely explanation for the position of the endogenous retroviruses in humans and chimpanzees is that they were inserted in a common ancestor. You have not provided any other explanation other than just saying, well, that's how God could have done it.
Yes, because we are making predictions here. Let's say we wanted to make a prediction here, and you could predict with evolution that the sequences of an ancestor will be transmitted to, the sequences of an ancestor will be transmitted to its descendants. That's a prediction you could make. But then what you're taking on that creationism standpoint is you are basically saying that God is inserting these viral sequences hundreds of times in the exact same places between humans and chimps, and you're doing that for the sole purpose of back interpreting what is otherwise a pure evolutionary prediction in advance, and you are simply reinterpreting that into creationism. You're creating this very unclarified scenario only in order to preserve the presupposition. There's absolutely no reason to think that God would insert virus sequences in the exact same places hundreds of times between chimps and humans, but there's every reason to think that the common ancestor of humans and chimps had many viral insertions, because literally all organisms do, and therefore we simply see it in its descendants.
Okay, so again, you've blurred some things between theology and biology here.
No, he hasn't. He just explained why the endogenous retroviruses suggest a common ancestor. Did you not understand any of that?
So, firstly, God creating within us, for example, bacteria. We have certain types of bacteria. For example, one particular type of bacteria helps us when it comes to digesting breast milk when we're children. So you are in no position to say what God can or cannot do.
I think we need to move on, as I do not wish to damage any of my viewers' brain cells anymore from being exposed to Subboor's line of thinking.
Secondly, when it comes to evolution predictions, so let's just get something right here. The Darwinists have been dead wrong.
Now he is deflecting from the discussion by ranting again about evolutionary biologists.
They've been dead wrong when it comes to their predictions about junk DNA.
Nope, we showed earlier that you were dead wrong about junk DNA.
They've been dead wrong when it comes to their entire understanding of natural selection and what it can actually do. So there's been many predictions when it comes to Darwinism, which have been falsified.
Here he is confused again. He said falsified when what he means is shown to be false. Actually, many predictions have been proven true in evolution, such as the discovery of Tiktaalik, an intermediate fossil that was found in a location where evolution predicted it would be found.
And in fact, when we have had a situation where anomalies pop up, like orphan genes, Darwinists have made counter predictions again, and they've been proven wrong again.
Nope, I did a whole video on how clueless you are about orphan genes. I will link it in the description.
So what I'd like to do now is explain to you the difference between origination probabilities and transition probabilities, because essentially your argument is an argument from homology. And if it's an argument from homology, then regardless of what you use, whether you use ERVs or you use something in biochemistry or whatever, it still has the same issues. So you can't say something in homology is a prediction when actually homology, from their perspective, they make the origination probability 0 or close to 0, and they make the transition probability close to 1. Those two things they use coupled with homology, and then they say universal common ancestry is true. But these two things are assumptions.
That has got to be one of the most clear examples of garbage word salad I have heard. I have not heard any credible evolutionary biologist talk about origination and transformation probabilities. This is something that only seems to pop up in creationist literature or rebuttals to creationists. How does anyone decide what the origination or transformation probabilities are? Because they have to be something that you discover, not something that you fix, as he says. Take the example of this circle. The radius of this circle is 5 centimeters. That's what it is. We can't fix it at a different level. We can't fix pi to different numbers. The area of the circle is pi multiplied by the square of the radius. That's what it is. We can't just decide a different formula for working out the area. By Subboor's logic, we could say that if we alter the radius of this circle, or we alter the value of pi, or we alter the formula for discovering the area, then we get a different result. This shows how clueless he is and how we can't just fix numbers to suit our narrative. Probabilities are only useful in predicting future events. They are not helpful when events have already happened. If you have already won the lottery, then you have won the lottery. The odds of winning it don't matter. What about the asteroid that killed the non-avian dinosaur 66 million years ago? It doesn't matter what the odds were of it hitting Earth or missing Earth. It did hit the Earth, it happened, and that's what matters. That's the same with evolutionary changes.
Give me some predictions.
Okay, look, so homology doesn't count for any prediction. Okay, how about transitional fossils? Do those count as predictions?
Transition fossils would do, yes.
Great. I already gave the example of Tiktaalik, which was found where evolutionary biologists predicted it would be found.
Yes, there have been many dozens of hominid species discovered. Would you like to dispute that before I move on?
No, I would not dispute that, but remember.
Okay, so let me keep going. So
okay, wait, one sec. You can't throw out something half.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So firstly, Darwin spoke about the Cambrian explosion.
The caller made a point about hominid transitional fossils. Subboor said he didn't dispute that, but then it moved immediately over to Darwin and the Cambrian explosion in a textbook example of changing the subject.
He spoke about this being an issue. And the problem with the Cambrian explosion is he thought it was going to get resolved. However, it got worse over time.
It didn't get worse over time. It was resolved. Professor Dave, in his exposure of Stephen Meyer, demonstrated how the fossils of the Cambrian era have ancestors that can be traced back to the previous geological period, the Ediacaran. I will link this video in the description.
The second thing is that
no, it did not.
The second, yes, it did. I mean, just just look into a disaster it was to try and explain, this explosion of life. The Cambrian explosion is a serious problem in anthropology. We have people like what's his name, Stephen Jay Gould. We have Richard Lewington. We have these people in paleontology who speak about punctuated equilibrium, how gradualism is dead, how the lack of gradualism is a trade secret in paleontology.
If you are going to quote mine, at least get the quotes accurate. Stephen Jay Gould was talking about transitional fossils, not gradualism, and this is a quote made in the 80s, and many more transitional fossils have been found since then, so this quote is obsolete. I will link this article from the Talk Origins Quote Mine project in the description.
We could talk about the Cambrian explosion, we could talk about the Ediacaran fossils, but let's specifically talk about, because the Ediacaran fossils are an earlier phase of the Cambrian fossils. But
Right.
The caller correctly knows that the Ediacaran fossils are precursors to the Cambrian fossils. This contradicts what Subboor said earlier, and Subboor has just nodded his head in agreement. This is truly bizarre.
Let's talk about what I brought up, the hominid fossils, because we start with, and these are sequential, we start with these apes which are living in trees, or they're adapted to live in trees, and then we have fossils of apes that have mixed, let's say, lifespans. They can both go around on the ground and they can live in trees.
Yeah.
And we have, and this comes after, that's not before, that's not contemporary, that's after. And then later on, we find fossils of apes that specifically live all across the ground. We have gradually evolving skulls of fossils, but we have a linear development of skull size, all sorts of traits towards the fossils of Homo sapiens. We have changes in even cranial developments that register the development of different brain regions over time towards modern humans. We have genome sequences of even Neanderthals, which show that perhaps there were some genes like the specific variant of the FOXP2 genes, which even if they don't give the Neanderthal full ability of language, Neanderthals very well may have had the ability to speak. And we have earlier fossils, I don't know if it was Homo erectus or a different one, which had another prior development to that, somewhere maybe in the neck or the throat, which gave it an enhanced ability to speak like we do. So there is all sorts of linear developments over time that continue appearing towards the current trajectory of Homo sapiens. And that is a transition in every possible sense.
Okay, so let's clarify this. When you say transition, do you mean that you can put these fossils in an order and say that these are the ancestors of humans?
This is what the evidence suggests.
Let's say pick one point in time. Let's define 10 million years ago, we had an organism that was, let's say, 50% similar to humans. And then a million years later, we have one it's maybe 60% similar. And I'm saying that the degree of similarity gradually increases until we get to Homo sapiens. In fact, even after we get Homo sapiens, it continues developing until we get to our current form of Homo sapiens. It is a linear development.
Okay, so you're just repeating what you said before. My question to you is, can you take the sequence and say decisively that the humans today are the ancestors of those primates that you're referring to?
The caller here has given an excellent explanation of the evidence that would suggest human evolution from earlier hominids, but Subboor, in his desperation to avoid any conclusion that humans may have evolved from earlier primates, falls back on his old tactic of asking whether the caller can be absolutely certain rather than saying it is scientifically very likely.
I'm asking, so these things...
Yes, I think it decisively shows. I think it shows we are the descendants.
It decisively shows that these are human ancestors.
Yes, I think it shows that.
Okay. Now, that answer that you gave, is that categorical or is that inferential?
What do you mean? Can you define categorical for a second?
That is just conclusive. There's no other way of explaining it.
It's clear Subboor has completely lost this discussion, as he has now demanded a level of proof that is only found in logic and mathematics, and is not something that any scientist would say. Perhaps we could ask what level of proof there is for his religious beliefs. What is the origination probability of an angel talking to a man in a cave, or the transformation probability of a creature growing wings and then flying a man to heaven and back? Let's see what else is discussed.
No, I mean, you said you watched my debate with Aaron Ra, and this thing came up about Homo erectus and how do you explain it. So all I simply said is, well, we as Muslims, we don't have a problem with the idea that they were non-human or human-like things, or the way we would define human is the children of Adam, things that existed before human beings, and they lived and they died, and we don't have a problem with it. Apes exist today, chimpanzees exist today, we have them existing in the past as well, and we have variations. And what we find is this, and come on, like let's stop messing around here, yeah, in terms of the way that you're trying to show this beautiful picture in paleontology about, this thing is into that. Every couple of years, a new skull, and they move them around like musical chairs.
No, they don't. New discoveries are incorporated into the picture with older discoveries to give us a clearer understanding. Nobody in science doubts human-chimp common ancestry on any scientific ground. We don't just have fossils, we have the overwhelming genetic evidence.
The fact is, from a Islamic point of view, from a Islamic theistic creationist point of view, all we can simply say is, well, these things existed, they lived, they died, and you're using things like, okay, so they may have had language, they could have had even culture. Some anthropologists argue for that, and and what we would say to that is, yeah, that's fine. We wouldn't challenge that. We'd say, yeah, that's fine. Like that for us would be things that existed before human beings. They lived and died, and that's it. Like it would not be like what you're trying to do is you're trying to make it a categorical argument, and all I'm saying is it's an inferential argument. And what we would say is, yes, we would accept their existence. We would accept, whatever information we have about them, but we wouldn't say they're our ancestors. So that's just a point of disagreement. But there's no way you can decisively show that I have to accept that those are ancestors. I can just simply say, well, those things were created by God. They lived, they died.
Well, this is the problem with, the language of absolutes, by which you can literally dismiss anything.
And on that point, I will end this third part of my response video and resume in part 4. Thank you for watching, and please let me know what you think in the comments section.